And now we continue with the server tab. Path to the temp folder, temporary folder. Um, Again, detected by Joomla automatically. As we saw with installing Joomla, the temp folder also needs to be writable, as we could see in how to say the system info, and we could detect if folders were or weren't writable. The gzip page compression, in combination with running cache, if you have a fairly large website and you want to offer your pages in a more speedy manner, gzip page compression might be a convenient thing to put on yes. Um, what happens is the pages are offered as gzip. Compare that with your regular known zip. It's also something that needs to be supported by your web server, but if you run Apache on a Linux web server, 99% you have a chance that it is supported. Um, what it does is it offers the page to the visitor in a packed version, a zip version, and the visitor that sees the page basically unpacks it on their system. This means that bandwidth on your system will diminish. So if you only have a relative small bandwidth on your web server, it might be a convenient thing to put gzip compression on. Again, in combination with having your Joomla run with cache on, this is a good way of speeding up your offering of pages to visitors. Error reporting, I would suggest to leave that on system default. Force SSL. SSL is a secure socket layer. If you don't know what that means, then leave it on none. It could be if you, for instance, run a web store on your Joomla website and you accept credit cards, for instance, uh, you might want to have secure socket layer on the entire site. Uh, what it does is it will not use HTTP, it will use HTTPS. Of course, your web server and website need to be configured for that. If I just do that out of the blue and click on apply, um, as you can see, there's a fair chance that I get problems. So there's a problem with this website security certificate. I will continue. And again, it cannot be found. So don't just do that because you would like to. There's some rules that need to be abided because of that. As I mentioned, your FTP will offer you the solution. I can go to configuration, and what I can do is I can edit the file by opening it. We are now in the configuration file, and all the settings that we just saw in how to say in the Joomla configuration, we can also find back in the file itself. And what we do is, here we can see the variable force secure socket layers, which now gives us basically an administration part which we cannot get into because it automatically wants to go to HTTPS, and my web server obviously has not been configured for that. We can set that back to 0. I've saved it, and the last thing to do is also put the file as it has done now. I go to this one and simply remove the S, and I'm back in my website again. So I can now close my FTP application here. I can go back to global configuration, go to my server tab, and here you can see force secure socket layers is back again. So I recommend not to play with that because you'll need to do a few tricks to get it back again, as you just saw me doing. Locale settings, the time zone settings. This means that you can set your website should you be in another country than Western Europe. Uh, I'm near Amsterdam. I'm from The Hague, the Netherlands. So I set my time zone on 1 hour plus. Go back to my server tab again. The FTP settings, a very important one. Um, Joomla is a bit known for not handling files very well. In the past, with the previous Joomla version, Joomla 1.0, it could cause huge problems. A little bit of explanation with that. You have FTP, and with that, you often put your files online with your FTP account. So that is your FTP login name, and the permissions will be related to that FTP account. Should you, after you've uploaded your website and running your Joomla website, for instance, install a certain extension, that is all done online through HTTP. And in a web server, everything that's done online is seen as the user, and I will use a common name, the user Apache or the user www. That is a different user than your FTP account. So it could mean that uh, there's a distinct difference between files that have been put there through Joomla itself, and there's files that have been put there through FTP. And the FTP settings can help you that if you then use Joomla to install items, if you have your enable FTP on yes, you fill in your proper host, your proper FTP port, your FTP username, password, and root, it will then not use the Apache or www user when you install things. It will use your FTP settings. So that could diminish file permission conflicts with that. Um, Personally, I do not have the problems very often, so uh, I leave it on no. Should you encounter problems with files, you can always put it on yes. For instance, if you install extensions and that doesn't work properly, you can change your FTP settings and enable the so-called FTP layer. Um, it will help with uploading new files with Joomla. The database settings, of course, they have been put in there with installing Joomla. It could be that in the meantime you decided to use a different database, or you have made a backup and renamed that. You can change settings here. Not advisable. Leave as they are. Then the email settings. The mailer settings, I would only change this if you have problems when, for instance, Joomla does new user registration and the emails do not come in. Should you have any problems with that, you might want to use SendMail. If that doesn't work, use SMTP server. If you use an SMTP server, you'll need to use your SMTP username and password, but and of course set the authentication on yes. Again, I advise to leave it as it is. PHP mail function, the mail from and the from name you can change into whatever you like, but The rest, do not change that as long as you do not have any errors. So leave it on PHP mail function, and only if you have errors, then try to use sendmail or the SMTP server, but basically leave it as it is.